Welcome to the Organizational Strength webinar series with Mike Martin. I'm Mary Price, the Events and Marketing Manager at the Shingo Institute. It's great to have you with us today. At the end of today's lecture, we'll have a short Q&A session, so if you would like to ask Mike a question, there's a chat button at the bottom of your screen. You can go ahead and answer or ask a question, and that will monitor it. I also want to thank our sponsor for today's event, which is the Huntsman School of Business MBA program. They offer an online 2-year degree program, and I'll send out a link for more information on that with the recording today. It's my pleasure to introduce Mike Martin. He's the founder of Sisu Consulting Group, which is a licensed affiliate of the Shingo Institute. Mike has been involved with the Shingo Institute for many years, and we're excited to have him with us today. With that, I'll turn the time over to you, Mike.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay, Mary?
I can.
All right, good. Well, welcome everybody. I was excited to hear that we had a number of people turning out for this time, the time we're going to spend together. This is our second session focusing on the critical few. In the last session, we talked a little bit about the turnaround environment in general. What does it take to have a turnaround mindset? What does it require of leadership? I would say the next 4 topics are really getting in a little bit deeper to the primary topics and issues that I deal with when I am coaching or consulting with leaders who find themselves in the need of a turnaround, or yet they are trying to get rapid results with a cultural transformation. And so that's really how I selected the topics that we're going to talk about. For those of you maybe who are new to this session, this is really going back and leveraging my experience. I started in the world of finance and in private equity, and I found myself with the opportunity. It was actually a great opportunity looking back to spend about 10 years of my career literally going into companies that we owned or we co-owned and turning them around. Our goal at that time was not to break up the company. It was not a workout situation in every one of these groups. We had investors and owners who loved the company. They loved the people. They really wanted it to do well. They just needed to get it back on track. And I had a great time doing that. So it was stressful. I mean, it was tough work. I'm not going to lie to you, but it was also a great time. So everything we're going to talk about today is really based on that. And it's a lot of the principles and approaches that I still use today. You know, I kind of learned it back in the trenches and when I was going to battle to really rally my team and to get together to really save an organization that we cared about. And I've really carried that over into all of my engagements now. So last time, just as by way of introduction, I gave you what I considered kind of 3 secrets. When we say secrets, they're not really that revolutionary. They're maybe what I considered, keys to a turnaround that may not be that intuitive. Number 1, and we're going to talk about this more as we go along in the series, it's just as easy to lead by principle as it is to lead by profit. I really had leaders all the time approaching me thinking that really our trade-off was either being principle-based or really going after short-term profit. And I found that in a turnaround situation, even if your focus was on reestablishing the stability of the business, getting some profitability, or radically improving your results, you did that through principles. Number 2, the tighter you focus, the higher your odds of success. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And number 3, you don't have to be perfect with any of this, but you do have to be passionate. You do have to really commit and lead from your heart and be the one who's most committed to this approach to make it work. So like I said, today we're going to go dive in a little bit more on the number 2, the tighter the focus. I get this question a lot. Here's what happens. We find ourselves in troubling times. We find ourselves where we've got to experience business renewal, or we really have got to do something different. And as we sit down and think of all of the things that either may be wrong or maybe need attention, the list can get overwhelming really fast. And what I experienced a lot myself, I'll just speak from my own experience, is that one of the toughest things that I had to deal with was not creating a list of all the things that needed to change. It was never the issue of, was I focusing, could I find the problems in the organization? I could see the problems all day long. The issue was, as soon as that list started to become huge, it was having the confidence to know that I wasn't going to be able to do everything if I wanted to be successful, and also have done enough analysis and engaging with my people so I knew what was the most important thing that we focused on. So that was really critical, because I could get overwhelmed as the turnaround leader, just like my people could get overwhelmed with the environment, the emotions behind it. So that part was so important for me to understand what were the key drivers that were really going to be the levers that I could move to turn the business on a dime and to get the effect and the results I needed, and then also give myself space to do that. I put this quote in because invariably, when it came to getting into a situation where we were struggling and we needed to get results quickly, people equated that with putting in more hours. They really equated that with, needing to do more, keeping busy, burning the midnight oil, really having my life, sacrificing my life in order to be able to do this turnaround. And while there were tough hours involved and there was a lot of things that we had to get done, really the most important thing that I did as a leader constantly was about reevaluating our priorities, planning down to those critical few, and as this quote said, fiercely protecting my time and my people's time to impact those critical drivers that we needed so that the business would start to turn. Now, that was part of the reason why understanding what was critical was so important. But the second was really the psychology of the environment that I was in. It was really understanding that when we were having trouble, or I was in an environment where we were having trouble, everyone knew it. And as soon as things start to go wrong, or let's say as soon as you find yourself in a situation that you haven't been in as a business before, maybe you've gone through some right sizing, you've had to do some layoffs, maybe your market in this type of environment we find ourselves in, your market just went away overnight and you're trying to rebuild. There's the planning part. There's the understanding how I'm going to plan and how I'm going to proceed as a leader to try to reestablish, my fundamentals of a business. But there's also some psychology that's going on in yourself as a leader, but also in your people. And that's where this whole idea of understanding fight or flight was really critical. Now, when people get into a situation, when I would come into an organization and it was about our time that we needed to really improve, what I was dealing with was already people hunkering down and going into survival mode. And when you look at what that means, when people go into survival mode or they find themselves in difficult situations that they haven't been in before, there are some physiological things that are happening. Number one, just physiologically, the heart rate goes up, blood pressure is up. There's their heightened anxiety all the time. They're feeling on edge for everything. So things that before might not have been a big deal now are a big deal. It's like kind of that hair trigger. There's physical tension, trembling. I mean, it's really a dramatic experience. And the body is geared to put you into that survival mode for very specific reasons, but it also needs to come back down. And what I found oftentimes is when we're in a turnaround environment, that level of stress and that level of anxiety gets heightened and it doesn't come down. It just stays there and it gets worse and worse. Well, if you're in that situation, yourself or your people, and you're trying to get something done, you also have to look at what's happening on the other side. As soon as I get into a fight or flight mode, my working memory, my ability to remember things and my working memory goes down. My ability to focus my attention and stay focused goes down. And the final thing that goes down is my cognitive flexibility, my ability to adapt. Okay, it's kind of that feeling that when we're in stress or we're asked to go do something, maybe impromptu, give a speech, that things that if were asked a question might come very easily at another time. As soon as you induce the stress, now I start forgetting, I get stumped. That was a very real occurrence that I was dealing with on a daily basis in environments like we find ourselves right now. So from a practical experience, not only did I have to leverage my time, but I also needed to focus on those critical drivers, focus on those critical few, because when everybody's in a state of panic and my people are worried about their own survival Are they going to have a job going forward? They're listening to the news and they know it's not great and they are extrapolating that in their own minds. Then their ability to remember, to focus, and their cognitive flexibility are also down. So if I can keep my message, my plan, and my approach simple, it also is going to help me in terms of rallying my people and getting their alignment and their support. Okay. So in essence, what was very interesting about it is that I spent probably 2/3 of my time communicating, prioritizing, adjusting our plan, and protecting my people. Really being out there, being visible, leading in a way that I was not only ensuring that everyone knew what those critical things were we had to win on today, but also working to get those stress levels down, working to find any opportunity that I could to get people out of fight or flight so that their natural brilliance would come back, so that their ability to problem solve would rise, so that their memory would reestablish, so that their focus could be there. So understanding that I had to spend so much of my time doing that, and I had little time left over to really make sure we were focused on the critical drivers, it took my to-do list or what I might have thought my plan was, and I had to radically cut it to be able to be effective. And that, in essence, really helped me be successful. So when we talk about what is a critical driver or why we need them, let's go a little bit farther into that concept. To me, as I would explain it to my leaders, I would say, really we're going from a shotgun approach to a rifle approach. We're really taking this idea of the improvements that we need to do, the things that we're going to have to attend to fix our current situation, from a spray and pray mentality where I'm really just putting a lot of lead out there and firing a lot, hoping that something hits. Because I don't have the ability to do that, I don't have the time, and my people are already anxious, that's just going to contribute to it. I need to think about one shot, one hit. I need to be more specific about understanding what the target is and why it's critical, and then spending more time aligning everybody to sight it in so that we can effectively hit it. Now, there was a book quite a few years ago. I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact date. It was called The Influencer, and it was by Vital Smarts, and they had an example in there that I won't do justice. If you want to read it, it's a great book, and get it and read all about it. But in essence, they had done this study, and the study was of weight loss, and it was the criteria of the people. They were going to look at critical behaviors. The whole book is about identifying these few critical behaviors that are going to be your highest leverage impact points. And as they looked at this study, they focused on people that had lost at least 40 pounds and I think kept it off for at least 6 weeks. And what I found really great about this example, and I've used it numerous times, was that for all of the things that we might think about when it comes to weight loss and all of the things we could do or how complicated we could get with our plan, they found 3 common behaviors, 3 common factors in this group. Number 1, they ate breakfast. Number 2, they took their weight every day. And number 3, they worked out on home equipment. So those were the 3 factors that they found that were consistent across this group that had had success. Now, to me, this really speaks to the importance of, but this idea behind, do you know your people, your market, your business well enough to be able to define 3 critical behaviors in simple and succinct terms like that? And as I thought about this, I thought about, let me see if I can get this. Hold on. There we go. Okay. I was thinking about an example back. Some of you may remember, this is probably going to really date me, with Richard Simmons and Deal-A-Meal. And it was really a weight loss program that had a series of cards, and it had these books, and you would plan out your meals throughout the week, and you got different cards and you put it together. And it was just a lot of different moving parts, a lot of different things that you needed to do. And I was thinking about, if we're thinking in the context of fight or flight, if we are thinking in the context that right now we have a struggle going on, we're not sure of where we're going to get to, how we're going to get there, this is uncharted territory. Is it going to be easier to follow and have success with a program like Deal-A-Meal, where I'm struggling with learning the program itself, how it works, and all the moving parts? or is it going to be easier to remember 3 key behaviors? I found each and every time, if I could boil it down to those 3 behaviors, I had success. I had success calming people down, reassuring them, aligning their activities, and getting the results we needed. And I'll give you an example. One of the companies that we had that I turned around, we owned veterinary clinics. We owned a lot of veterinary clinics. And for all of the things that we could have done, all of the problems that we had that needed to be corrected, if I looked at that long list again, the more that I learned about the environment, the more that I talked to the customers, the people that were bringing their loved ones, their animals in, and the more that I really understood the business, the more we came down to it was 3 factors that led to our success. Number 1, I needed to really get my veterinarians, my doctors, to understand that when they are laying hands on your animal and they're just talking to you, they're actually diagnosing what's going on. But most people didn't know that. They thought they were just petting the animal, but they were actually diagnosing for hip dysplasia and looking at the fur, a lot of different things. So we identified that we needed to talk with our hands, talk through what you're doing as you're working with your hands with their animal. Number 2, we found that many of our doctors would prejudge, as much as we don't want to do that. When you would come in, they would decide, judging you without knowing you, whether or not you would like to provide the highest level care to your pet, to your family member, your loved one, or whether you didn't. And what we needed to get them to understand is present all their options. Don't make the decision for them. Let them decide what's important to them, how much care they want to give. Because people were frustrated to find out that they could have had additional care, but they weren't offered that. Finally, and the third one, this one was really more about efficiency internally. It was how the doctors leveraged their time to hand off to staff, but it was also the idea that the staff was more, customers and our patients were more comfortable talking to the staff about certain issues than they were the veterinarian, because they didn't want to feel stupid. So by handing it off, they really had a much better experience, but we were also more efficient in our operations. So of all the things we started with, that everybody giving me their independent ideas of everything we had to do as a vet company, we focused on these 3 things and had great success. That's the concept of critical behaviors. So I'm going to spend just the last couple minutes on this. How do you select them? Now, this is a process in 30 minutes where I can't do justice to the analysis we do, the process that I had, how I arrived at what those specific drivers were. But I thought what I would leave you with is 3 categories to look at, okay? Number 1 is financial. This is just the good old-fashioned being able to go through your balance sheet, your profit and loss, and your cash flow statement, and really understand what drives your financial success. Now, what drives your financial success is always going to be aligned to process, to how we operate, to the way we're organized, to those things in the Shingo world that we look at and attribute with our systems, our principles, and our tools. But what was critical for us, especially in an environment where we were struggling, is that we needed to understand, if we wanted to become strong as an organization, part of strength was financial stability. And to do that, then we asked ourselves, what were those levers? What can we affect today to get immediate results? So we needed to attend to that and really get specific. The second was the culture. And I put that as Shingo principles. I know Shingo principles apply to probably all 3 of those. But I would say that that's really where we identified down those critical things that we wanted to see from our culture, whether it was an increased sense of respect through teamwork, whether it was a sense of how we led with humility, and we demonstrated that each and every day. It might have been how we problem solved, or how we worked together to immediately identify what the issue was, drive down to what the cause was, and try to put something in place on a daily basis to make it a little bit better tomorrow than it was today. So I consider that all our cultural drivers. They were, to me, if we didn't work on our culture and the principles of how we led and how we worked together and what we thought about our customers, then we were not going to be able to affect that financial stability, which was going to keep me in the game long enough to get me to the third. The third is growth. And growth isn't talked about near enough. This idea of finding ways that we grow as an organization, that we grow our business, that we grow our people. But there were a lot of people that approached a turnaround just on moving the financial levers. And as soon as you weren't bleeding anymore, or as soon as you got a little bit of results and you could establish profitability, that was it. But if they did that at the expense of their people and the expense of their culture, it wasn't sustainable. And the people and the power that they had each and every day to help us succeed was really what was going to give me those financial levers. They worked together. But the third thing that was really important was hope. People could reduce, in my experience, people could reduce their level of anxiety. We could get out of fight or flight a bit by showing that we work together in a different way to reestablish strength in the organization. But what we really needed was hope for the future, and that was going to come through growth. And that was based on our industry, what I felt our capabilities were, what we might have been suited with, what we've done in the past. How can we start to leverage opportunities to grow in the future? So this slide is really about saying, okay, if you understand that focusing down is critical in times like these for your success, but also from your people, if you can go with this idea that it's about finding those critical few that sometimes right off the bat are not what they seem to be, what they appear to be, but they're the most powerful things, like the weight loss example or the veterinary example, then I would challenge you as your next steps to look and ask yourself those questions, these questions right here: financial, cultural, and growth. Where do you see that your potential key drivers are sitting in there? It can't be a long list. But do you know where you take some of those rifle shots to affect these three categories? Okay. I keep hitting the wrong button. Okay. And I would identify that as, that was some of our first work that I did as a leader. And I got our leadership group together, was to identify and be very clear on what those financial, cultural, and growth key drivers were. Okay. With that, Mary, I know you're still there. I know I'm 4 minutes. You know how it is getting me to shut up once I get started. That kind of gets us to our session 3. So maybe I'm seeing from Kevin a question here. Am I seeing the question there?
Just looking. If there is, if there is any questions out there, go ahead and just answer them in that chat.
All right, so I'm seeing it. Kevin says, how might you model internal agility in times of rapid external change? Woo, that is a smart question. That's a huge question, Kevin. Oh my goodness. I should have started at 10 on that one. Man, agility takes on a lot of that word has so many different definitions in my experience right now, means a lot of things to other people. But I would say that the agility that I was going for was more of cultural agility early on. As we were really rapidly needing to change, or we were needing to respond to external change, what I needed most was to develop that culture where I could have my people being agile in terms of taking on a challenge, working together to solve problems, being flexible in terms of if something didn't work, how could we change what we were doing? Don't hold on to an idea that just wasn't working, but changing. So that's initially how agility hit me. All right, Steve Hess, can you comment on the importance of employee ideas and how to focus people? Yes. Ideas were critical. Ideas were critical in the turnaround environment. But I would say if I'm not in a turnaround mode, I had a lot more latitude to let people experiment and find their way to alignment through ideas. And I found that to make us really strong in the future. It really built our organizational strength. But early on, I really focused a high level of autonomy around pointing them in the direction of our key drivers. So I wanted lots of ideas. It was all about daily improvement. I couldn't wait until the end of the week just on our timelines, but I was really communicating what our key drivers were and aligning them to that. Regarding critical behaviors, when there are several dozen options, How do you select the winners and continually ignore the rechecks? Oh, Josh, good question. Sometimes you don't know which ones to select. What I did, part of the way that we would evaluate whether or not we were moving in the right direction is that every time we chose to affect change on something, every time we chose to improve something, we always had a question, which is how long will it take to see the change, and how can we know if we got there? And so we would build follow up into the process of we selected what we thought were winners, but we had a follow up process connected with those to validate and adjust in real time. And that was really important because sometimes we chose dogs and we had to adjust, and sometimes we chose things that we weren't quite sure, but we got there. Did the leadership team utilize Hoshin Conry? Yeah, we had a strategy deployment process that we used for sure, that cascaded that down all the way to the team and individual level. I would say what I'm talking about now in terms of the critical drivers, we're really about setting that level one, that one-page strategy, which let everybody know that what we were cascading, and it helped ensure that we didn't start cascading too much detail. So by the time we got out to the field, nobody could execute on it. How do you identify the critical behaviors and how often do you reassess? Boy, a lot of great questions this time, guys. I'm sorry. These are awesome. How did we identify the critical behaviors? I started that process with the leadership. I did industry research on it, and I found experts in different areas in different types of processes or in our company that we brought in to help us refine those critical factors. So for example, if in one of the organizations that I had, I realized that I was going to have to readdress the way that we were looking at machining and how we were looking at setup times. So I brought in people, the best that I could find, that understood this very well and understood our specific applications, and they helped my team and me put together those critical drivers. So it was a combination, but I really took responsibility for the first round, which was to connect our overall vision and our success to those key areas. Wow, Kevin, suggestion of tools to help leadership teams. Here's what I'm going to do. There's a lot of questions here. I'm going to try to get to some of them maybe in a follow-up. I'll send a follow-up email to all of you. I think, Mary, you've got all the emails, right?
I do. Yep, we can go ahead.
I'll go ahead and send these slides and then let me address some of those because the tools are going to be tough to go into right now, Kevin. Sorry, but I'll address that. All right. How do you manage the balance in a large organization between individual business units and the company overall in determining and cascading the critical drivers? Wow, you guys are bringing out all the easy questions today. Whew, that's a good one. I would say carefully. It's tough. If what you have is a large organization and the top part of the organization doesn't really recognize that you're in a turnaround, but you do, that's a different process, and it involves clarifying a message and positioning statement and selling up. And I kind of show them how to do that. Luckily, in my situation, sorry if you guys aren't in this situation, but in my situation, I was the one responsible for the entire organization. So it was starting with me. Now, that didn't mean that I had easy buy-in. That didn't mean that everyone agreed with my approach. Far from it. I had tons of detractors. So I still had to figure out my messaging, and I still had to figure out how I was going to actually sell this to the organization and spread it. But since I recognized the need and I was at the head, I didn't have to really go up. I had to deal with the board, but it was mostly about bringing it down. Okay, how constantly would the leadership team meet to review the key behaviors? We would talk about our behaviors monthly. We met daily in terms of improvements and escalations. The thing that we were doing to respond to the environment we found ourselves in, that was daily. We did weekly in terms of connecting the actions we were taking and then looking how it was impacting the business overall. I had some critical weekly things I did. But once we established things like what did it mean to be a leader with humility, how were you expected to support your team, what did we expect from team members, we looked at those monthly. We didn't constantly reassess those. They weren't that frequent. All right, What drivers are available for an event agency? Veronica, when I send out a message, because I'm already 1 minute over, tell me what you meant by event agency, okay? Send that back to me and I'll answer that one. As I'm more visual, could you be kind to share with an experience you've had where you can see your team change from a shotgun? Yeah, Gustavo, let me think about that. Maybe in the follow-up email, I can think about an example of how we went from a shotgun to more of a rifle. All right, what were the most common critical metrics? Okay, so as a leadership team, honestly, in a turnaround environment, some of our critical metrics were very financial. They were very much about where we were relative to our cash position, what was coming up in the next 7 days, how we were impacting the most critical factors relative to like our cost of goods. We were looking at labor utilization, basically how are we doing, having our people be productive and getting their feedback on that. Now, in terms of what we shared with teams, I shared almost everything with my teams. I mean, there were some things that I really couldn't share in terms of stuff that was going to the bank and other things that were just, I was not at liberty. But everyone knew. I would translate maybe the top level financial indicators, maybe some of those the board and others didn't want me to share, but I would always translate those operationally. So for example, you knew operationally what we had to win on if we were going to get the right financial metric we needed. That I shared liberally. Everybody knew where we were. It was open and honest all the time. The other thing that we looked at was how we were working together as a team. So that was really about us getting out. I'm going to talk about this more in motivating employees and leading with humility. But we were constantly looking at how we as a leadership were doing once a week in terms of what successes we were seeing. Were we starting to see people translate what we were hoping to have into results? So we looked at like our leadership behaviors and looked to find examples of how we were doing to celebrate, but also where we needed to improve. And then we had very tactical measures. I'll also go into that a little bit of building the plan, how we went from some of those tactical things to more of a longer term focus, but that's probably session 5. So, Mary, sorry, I know that was really rapid fire. Like I said, I'll send out to everybody these slides. If I didn't address, because I know some of you, I just didn't feel like I could address your question right now, please send me another message, or I'll try to send a couple of those out when I do it. And we will get into some of these, like how we worked as a leadership group with our employees and stuff, with the motivating employees session 3, and then session 4 with the, how we defined humility and what it meant to lead with humility and in a highly accountable environment.
All right. Thanks so much for everyone to join today. Thanks, Mike, for your time, and
thanks everybody.
See you next week.
All right. Sounds great.